Plainview and Lubbock, are you there?
Yes,
Lubbock
sir.
here.
Excellent. And you got the exam?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right, super. We're going to spend some time here in just a moment and go over everything in the review and then take the exam. And then I'll have something at the end. We'll talk about that. So, hope everyone's doing well. All right. If I can get my chair positioned here. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm a little raspy today, but I'll do my best. We worked, 6.5 hours outside yesterday, and with the wind and whatever's blowing around. And it's funny when you're working outside, of course you've got the weather to deal with and whatever pollens and dust and everything else, but where we're working to put up this new mosaic, and I will show you pictures soon, maybe within a week or so I'll get to show you some pictures. They're kind of keeping it under wraps right now. But they did have a picture of me on the Levelland paper last week, but it wasn't showing much, so we haven't revealed it yet. So we were talking yesterday about how they're going to do the unveiling, and I said, well, you could have a big truck blocking the way like they do those homes that they rebuild or whatever. We're trying to figure that one out, but breathing not only whatever pollens and dust are in the air, and fighting bees that come around for whatever reason, and all those things, but we've got the exhaust from the cars and trucks that go down College Avenue, which is Highway 385, and then every once in a while that's kind of mixed with the barbecue place at Dickey's, and all these different things going on. So I may have to clear my throat a few times today, but I'm going to try to carry on here. Just to clarify, I want to make certain that I follow what I told you the other day. Remember what I said, that I try to always tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I tell you, and then I tell you what I told you. That's what I'm doing today. And if you don't get the alerts from me, and you don't get the announcements, and you're not checking your Blackboard, or if you miss, you're not checking the recording, and if you're having a problem, you don't send me an email and say, Mr. Hope, let's work this out, I can contact tech support, or you can directly, and they can help you work it out. But I think that everything is communication-wise is what they call 5x5. It's working well, and if you don't get an email from me, check your SPC email. I had a student one time said, "I never get your emails," and I said, "Are you checking your SPC email?" And they said, "What's that?" Okay, let's talk about this. So you should be getting those from me. You should look at Blackboard. I try to put everything on there. Hopefully you're working on your paper for Dale Chihuly and his team. 3 questions, right? Easy, right? Easy points. Now, if you do less, you probably will earn less points. If you do more, the more and better you do. If you impress me well, you might earn even more points. Those points just add into your test grades, right? Your daily average. Have any of you checked Grade Center? Yes, sir. What's your question?
Okay, so on the outlook that they my contract year going over that, I just wanted to make sure that I had it right. That it's like mandatory extra credit, right?
That one you have to do.
Okay, but those points
But
they give them.
they add into it, and what I was going to tell you, we're trying to work it out. I think it's something I did. I'll just own up to it anytime it's my fault. But we thought we had the permission set right and all the settings right on the grades. But if you look at Grade Center, if you have looked at it, anybody looked at Grade Center? You see your grades. You see, and I just combined part 1 and 2 together and put that grade in there for Unit 1. If you look at, there's a column way near the end that says Other Extra Credit. If you earned any other extra credit, it's in there. You notice that there's also a column for Chihuly. There's nothing in there yet, and I'm sorry if you've sent me your Chihuly and I haven't responded. I've not responded to anyone, I don't think, because that's not due until Thursday, this coming Thursday. So I will take care of those. But for some reason or other, it's not adding in those extra points. So let's say you made a 75 on Unit 1 test, and then you went to First Friday Art Trail and you earned 10 points. Well, it should boost it to an 85. That's how good that is to do those things. But for some reason or other, it doesn't seem like it's showing up in the average column. So we'll get that worked out. So I'll get tech support to help me with that. So just relax with that for a little bit, and maybe by next week we'll have that figured out. So no worries there. Any other questions about anything? Yes, yes ma'am. No, I want, and of course this is art appreciation, so what I'm trying to get you used to, and the next thing that we'll do soon is I will teach you those 4 steps. Count them 4, right? No, wait, 4. 4 steps for doing this art criticism, and one of the things is just learning to describe it. So seeing what you see, and in your own words, telling what you see. And so if you want to include images, you can copy and capture images, right? Taylor, did you figure out how to do that? And you can put those in there if you wish, but just in your own words. That's what I'm wanting to do right now. And I really haven't taught you those skills to do it, so I just want to see what you're doing and just how you can respond to those 3 questions. Simple, right? 3 questions. And it's just a boost to you. I don't want anyone to not do this, but I found out a while back in these things that if I don't have some sort of I'm sorry, my screen just went out here. If I don't have some sort of a penalty attached to it, some people won't do it. I don't know. Maybe that's the way they're wired to do that. But anyway, I don't want to impose that penalty on anyone, but sometimes I have to because people don't think I'm meaning what I say, but I am. I try to be a person of my word. So anyway, so have fun with it. That's the main thing I would tell you. in describing it and looking at that work. How many of you have gone to the website, the Chihuly website? Is it cool or not? It's amazing, isn't it?
I think my favorite thing on that website is either the illumination or the
Yeah.
glass on glass.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to pin me down and say what are your favorites, it would be tough for me, because I love all of it. And I've seen some actual works, and I hope you all get to, because it's nothing like even the best video can be. Yes, sir.
Have you ever seen like the illumination before?
Not those that are,
Ones at the ceiling?
yeah, now the chandeliers, but that illumination, no, I've not seen it. I have some friends that are now in Las Vegas, and they said, you know, it's kind of crazy with the limitations they have, but they had this vacation scheduled, so they've gone to celebrate an anniversary in Las Vegas, and they've gone to the Bellagio, and I'll talk about that later, but the Bellagio has that huge Persian, that ceiling, the Fiore di Como, I'll talk about that later, but it has that ceiling in there, and they said, I've seen pictures of it, but it's like, there's a couch, they said we just laid back on that couch and just looked at it for a long time, it's just amazing. So, and that's true of all of them. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoy that Chihuly. If you've not looked at it, today's the day, sometime tonight, after class, whenever. Don't wait until the last minute to do this, please. But I want you to have fun with it. And I picked something that I thought would be exciting to look at and would just amaze you. So I'm always amazed by it, and I've seen it. I've done a little bit of glass blowing, but it's like, wow, this is unreal. Very cool. So have fun with it. And if y'all have questions, email me and I'll answer or help you any way I can. So, let's see. We need to get into this, don't we? Let me find my notes here. So, this unit 2 that we're doing now, is focusing on 2D media, right? And there's some other 2D media we'll throw in there later, some of the graphics and so on. But let's right now focus on just each of these sections, and if you have questions about them, then I'll be glad to answer them, and then test you on that here in a little bit. What's the most basic of art forms? Drawing, 2D art forms. And honestly, you see Chihuly. How does he start out his designs? He draws, right? He may take pencil, he may take colored markers, he may take paint that's in a ketchup or mustard dispenser and squirt it out on the canvas or the paper. And he has those drawings for sale too. People snap those up. So drawing is the most basic because it's been the kind of a finished work, but it also sketches and gets ideas out. And that brings up the second part there. 3 basic categories of drawing, right? One is the sketch, and it can be a quickly done drawing that helps record ideas, like a gesture drawing or something we talked about. It can also be a plan or a study for a project. I can show you later about this mosaic that we've done, because we've been working on this for almost a year, off and on, doing other things, but we began with some quick sketches. And then we went to more detailed plans for this, and then we went to very detailed plans, and then we went to a full-scale drawing. So 6 foot by 12 foot drawing. And then we had to map out each of the shapes of the colors and several things like that. So that's kind of that second step. And then a fully developed work of art is what many drawings are. If some of you went to my office that time we went out and saw my self-portrait, that's a finished work. So we saw all examples of all those different things, right? So you know those 3 categories, and those are pretty easy to pin down. We talked about both dry and fluid media. Dry media is just like a pencil, right? Or charcoal or something that's dry. Fluid media in drawing would be what? Yeah, ink and brush. Ink and wash, where you mix water with the ink and use a brush to apply that, but yes, it's wet, but you're not painting, right? Why are you not painting? It's not paint, it's ink, right? Yes, sir? You'd be painting, 'cause it's paint. So that's just the dividing line. And I gave you examples of those and showed you, all the different media that I had on hand. And so you saw everything from, probably the earliest art material that man used was charcoal from a fire. And graphite wasn't discovered till a lot later, but we looked at pencils, different types of pencils, different grades of charcoal, chalk, pastels, oil and chalk pastels, crayons, Conte crayon, all those different things. And then fluid media, and I talked to you about how pen first was made from a feather, and then now they're steel, and we talked about that. We talked about this idea of what a carton is, that was a planning drawing, right? And we looked at some examples of Michelangelo's, we looked at examples of Raphael's carton drawings. The term then became known as cartoon. Now cartoons are funny, but they're also political, right? They're also making a point about something. So we talked about that and how the cartoon developed, and cartoons are still very important. They're still used. And I don't know how many of you go to a news page every day, anybody besides me? You should. I had a student one time tell me, well, I don't really need to know all that stuff. And I said, well, and he said, I don't need to be involved in politics. And I said, politics is involved in you. It directs your life. So know what you're, we're voting in Texas on some new constitutional amendments. So that's important, because we have a decision, and we have a say in that decision that's being made. But know that when you look at those news pages, and I look at both sides, I like to see what both sides are saying. Yeah, and there are definitely both sides, right? But a lot of times in there, and it can be very controversial. If someone does a drawing of someone and someone objects to it, it can be they can object strongly. In fact, people are killed over drawings, political cartoons. So, we talked about how some of those first prints were done and so on, how people objected to them. So, any other questions about drawing, per se? All right, so that's one category in flat or 2D media. The next is painting that follows. And we said that paint, all paint, car spray paint, car paint, house paint, watercolor, oil paint, all has three basic constituents, right? What gives color to the paint? The pigment. Are the pigments man-made or natural? Yes, they're man-made and natural. That's the answer. They're both. And they're derived from minerals that are naturally occurring, but also chemical sources. And then you have to have something to make the paint stick. We call that what? Binder. The binder, or sometimes it's called the vehicle. And then the solvent. The solvent makes it fluid. And the solvent can be water, but it may be mineral spirits, like in oil paint. You have to have paint thinner. Pardon?
That's what I was thinking of when you said solvent and paint thinner.
Yeah. And that's what we usually talk about, but we don't think of water being a solvent, but yes, it is in water-based media. It is a solvent. So, for acrylics and watercolor. Then we talked about this idea of fresco. Now, fresco is a certain kind of painting, but the word comes from the Italian Latin base, which means what? Fresh. Right? We talk about al fresco dining and all that kind of thing. But that word means fresh, and it comes from the idea that you put on a stable wall Usually it's on a plaster wall, it could be a stone wall, could be sheetrock if it's good. Then you put plaster on that, and as the plaster is drying, you paint on it with a water-based paint that is absorbed and becomes part of, chemically bound to the plaster as the plaster is bonding to the wall. So it's a very permanent kind of paint. And we have them that are more than 2,000 years old. They're still pretty amazing. So some that survived the volcano eruption in 79 AD in Vesuvius. It's amazing how good they are. And we looked at Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. That's one of the most famous ones. The Lord's Supper that Da Vinci painted. That's also one of the most famous. But there's one at Holden Hall. And once again, if anybody really, really needs some points and your grade is not what it needs to be, go to the Tech campus, go to Holden Hall. That's not open on weekends. But go there, take some pictures and send them to me and say, Mr. Hope, can I get some extra points for this? And I'll say, yes, you may have some good points for that. So, a heads up on that. And we talked about this idea of, you can't do a whole big wall with fresco because it's going to be drying, right? So you can only work in a small space. We're doing about a 1 foot square an hour on mounting this mosaic, but they call that little area about a 1 foot square a giornate, as a day's journey. They could only do that much in a day.
Oh, so it's not like you can just like put all of it up in the front.
No. You could only, we looked at some of those where you could see like the head of a figure and maybe the torso he could do in one day. He might not even be able to do the arms, so you kind of see a dividing line in that.
And you said it's over there at where is it? On College Avenue?
Oh, where we're doing the mosaic? On College Avenue, yeah. Across from United Supermarket, yeah. But we're doing about a square foot an hour, but I mean, we've worked on this for months to do the actual construction. We're just mounting it now. But don't get confused, y'all, with that and fresco, right? Okay. That's mosaic. Now, I'll talk about that here in a moment. And then we talked about the other things that are listed here, encaustic, which uses wax, and temper paint, which uses what as a binder? Egg yolk. Yeah, very good binder.
Is that why it doesn't have a smell to it?
No, if it's fresh. You can't mix it and keep it for a while. You know what happens? You know that smell, right? Rotten egg smell. I was gathering eggs for my grandma when I was about 4 or 5. I remember this very clearly, even though I was so young. And I knew where the hens, they were free-range chickens. They had a chicken coop, but they went out and they just laid their eggs wherever. And I knew where they laid their eggs, and I saw this one egg, and I thought, oh, I've never seen one there before. And almost, it was like it was a dirty trick, I thought, but almost as I touched it, it had been out in the hot sun for who knows how long. It burst open. And that smell is unmistakable.
It burns?
It burst. It just broke open, and that smell is almost like a green cloud came up from it. Probably not, but that's what that makes the story better, right? It's bad. Yeah, I mean, because of the sulfur, right? Yellowstone National Park, some of the springs, and some of the springs in New Mexico and southern Texas, they have that sulfur in them because it's coming out of a volcanic formation. Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, give me some Vicks Vapor Rub to put in my nose or something like that. Yeah. So anyway, not to get too far afield into the hot springs from there, but that egg smell, yes, it can be bad if it's not fresh. So you have to do it fresh every day. But that egg yolk, sticky, excellent binder, makes a great drawing. And you can, painting rather, and you can layer it because it has a translucence to it. I don't think I missed anything else there. Let's go on to the second page, and we talked about oil paint. Oil paint was a breakthrough because at that time in the 1400s, they began to have, I'll have to switch on this later. They began to have wider trade and more sources for pigments, and so they had more colors available than they'd ever had before. And everything else was kind of muted, and it's like, okay, the Renaissance is the rebirth, and it's like, wow, all these paintings are so colorful. Well, they had more colors. Oil paint was a big development too, because they didn't have to worry about it drying. It stayed moist for days sometimes. And some thick oil paint may take 2 weeks to dry completely. Here in West Texas, maybe less. But anyway, depends on the humidity. And the pigment, the oil paint, is made from linseeds. So they're heated, they're pressed in a special press, and it squeezes that oil out. And so if you ever walk into an oil painting lab, have any of you ever painted with oils? That smell is distinctive, right? And it's just because of that linseed oil. I have some linseed oil in a can that you can mix with paint, and you even get close to it, and you can kind of smell it because it's been used before, and there's a little residue around there. So it was a great innovation for painters, but it has to be mixed with a solvent like turpentine, paint thinner, something like that. Acrylic paint, I'm sorry, I'm getting caught on the cable here. Haven't disconnected anything yet. They've been rewirings. We talked about acrylic paint. Acrylic paint was a fairly modern innovation after World War II, part of World War II experiments with other chemicals. But it's a polymer, it's a plastic. Acrylic is liquid plastic. And once it dries, it is permanent. I've had people say, can you get acrylic paint out of clothing once it's dry? And I said, you can try. I'll tell you what my teacher told me. He said, if you want to get acrylic paint out of a shirt, here's the tool to use, and handed us a pair of scissors. That'll work. Well, you can use denatured alcohol or something that can break down that polymer, but I've not had a whole lot of success with it. It's made to be permanent, plastic, right? The watercolor, we talked about watercolor, uses a gum solution, usually gum arabic, and the pigment. But the gum solution is the binder, and of course water is the solvent. And then we talked about thicker watercolor called gouache. What's the difference between a mosaic and a mural? We're working on a mosaic right now, so we're using paint, right?
No.
We're not.
A mural,
Mural is painting. Mosaic is made from small pieces of colored glass or stone or other tile. So there's a big difference. And later in class, we'll talk about mosaics after the test today. So I'll show you some.
Are you creating the thing?
Pardon?
Remodeling the bathroom, you doing mosaics?
No, you're tiling. If it's a mosaic, is really pictorial. I mean, it's a design, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you buy these things and you walk down the aisle at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you see mosaic tile. Well, it's little pieces put together in lines. Okay, I get it, but it's not a mosaic. Not artistically a mosaic. Anyway, small pieces, yeah, but not to make a design. And that's what I said in my review notes here. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So when you're making the mosaic, with the glasses, do you just break glass and fit it into the glass?
Wear safety glasses, use carbide tip nippers. I'll show you that process. I'll talk about that next time, so you can see the process. Yeah, it's time consuming, but
One little mistake, you have to start over, right?
well, you got another piece of tile, and you break that and set those pieces aside, and you'll use them somewhere else. Anyway, I'll bring tile and the tools and everything and talk about that next time on Thursday, so you can see it. So, no other questions on paint? Let's jump over to printmaking. Any questions, that you have right now about printmaking? What sets printmaking apart? You make an original matrix or plate, right? And what can you do from that original matrix or plate or block? Multiple prints. We call those multiple prints what? An edition. It's a series of prints, right? Okay? So it's an edition. And printmaking, that's the multiple copies part. I gave you that in the notes the other day. Printmaking allows people to see your artwork in other places because it's fairly inexpensive, and they can be distributed more widely than one original painting might cost $1,000 or $3,000, but you might buy a print that the artist can produce 100 of for $25. And it works pretty well with the Walmart principle, right? Because you make volume, right? And you can sell at a lower price, and then you actually make more money than making an original painting or drawing or whatever. I gave you 5 categories of printmaking here. One is relief printmaking. You remember the wood block that I showed you? Now remember this term, wood block or wood cut. It's not like a rubber stamp exactly, because that's made by machine. So remember wood cut or wood block, relief printmaking, and linoleum block. We talked about that. Lino cut or wood cut is sometimes used. But the ink is rolled onto the raised surface, right? The relief surface. So just like the ridges of my finger here, it's on the top surface and not down in the crevices. And so you carve away what you don't want to print, and just like the block that I showed you, that Jimi Hendrix image, then you print from the raised image. That's a relief print. Wood cut or lino cut or wood block. That's different from intaglio. Now, I know it looks like intaglio, but intaglio is the name. And 2 types of intaglio, etching and engraving, right? Those are the 2 main types that we focused on. The reason you get an engraved invitation and the ink is raised on that cool invitation is because the ink is printing from the crevices, right? Not the raised surface. So you use either a sharp tool and carve into a metal surface usually, or you use acid to bite or eat into that surface. You rub ink on the surface, you rub it off, and it stays in the crevices. Then you run it through a press, and it lifts that ink out onto the paper. That's an intaglio print. That's an etching or an engraving. We talked about that. We talked about lithography. If I ask you what's used to print your textbook, what's used to print posters, newspapers, magazines, you would say relief printing, right? No. Lithography. Lithography is used because instead of, litho means stone, right? So anytime we see the word graph, it's making an image or writing an image or creating an image with that stone. The original limestones became so hard to get that they came up with a way of texturing metal the same texture. And so they put these images on big drums now. It's all done digitally, but it's still printed from those plates, those matrices. And your textbook was printed that way, magazines are printed that way, newspapers. So lithography is the one method out of these 5 that's used the most often. And then silkscreen or serigraphy, comes from the Latin for silk, and that's using a stencil on a piece of fabric. Now silk is not always used because it's gotten kind of pricey, and they found that they can use different synthetic materials. But it's still a weave of material that a stencil is on, and I showed you several examples of that. And some of you have done that, where you put the ink on the surface, use a squeegee and push it through those pores of the fabric, and it prints on the surface, either poster, t-shirt, whatever. Some of you may be wearing ones that are printed silkscreen. Okay, next page. If you make a print, you put an image on a sheet of glass or metal, and you put paper down on it and rub it, and you lift it up, that image is going to be gone, so we can't print it again. We can't print an edition, but that's what a monotype is. Mono means one, so you can make one single print from that, not an edition. So I included that in there. And we talked about digital printing, 3D printing. It's an amazing world that we live in, isn't it? Technology. I have friends that say, I don't want to do any of that, but I'm interested in whatever's going on out there. And I like to use it in my work. I haven't done 3D print yet, but I love the technology. One of the, well, I'll talk about that later. I'm going to skip that. Erase that. We'll cut all that out in editing. Okay, chapter 2.8, or the chapter on photography, I'm sorry. The next section is photography. Photography is from the Greek, means writing with what? Light. Light is necessary. And it doesn't matter if you're using silver gelatin-based film and paper, or you're using your iPhone, right? You've got light-sensitive cells, materials, whatever, that record the image from real life. We talked about what a camera is. Camera has to be really fancy, right? Can be. But I showed you a camera that's simple, right? Made from an oatmeal box. So it's just a way of allowing light into that. Camera really means a room or a box. And it allows light into that, so that it can be recorded on a sensitive material. And we talked about the development of photography. Your text had some of these examples. But the first permanent image, 1837 is a long time ago, right? It's amazing. But that's when the first permanent image was done by Joseph Niepce, and then he worked with Daguerre to advance that. But we talked about several other ways that photography can be used and just looked at different things. I'm not going to ask you any of those. I mean, photojournalism and documentaries and landscapes and so on. We looked at all those. We talked about film, digital art, film, moving pictures is what they call them. We just say movies, but that's what it originally was. Motion pictures or movies. Developed from the experiments that Edison had done, but before Edison, there was this guy with this strange name, Ed Weir de Muybridge. Really was the guy who unlocked the whole question about how to stop motion, right? Because of his experiments with the horses running on the track and taking multiple still pictures and recording that little frozen moment in time. And that led to the development. He worked with Edison. They took that idea and just advanced it. And we wouldn't have movies if it hadn't been for Muybridge and what he did. So very important development. And we looked at animation. I mean, even today with digital animation, I noticed that they're having Paul Davidson over here at Technical Arts is doing a check your email, SPC email, because he sent this to all SPC. Paul Davidson is doing a continuing education course on making animated movies. Some of you saw that. So check that out. They've got the technology, they've got the equipment over there and the applications to do that. So that might be fun for some of you. But even with modern technology, for every second you see, and that's what makes Snow White so incredible, this hour-and-a-half movie, they had to do these paintings on clear pieces of plastic, all the details there, all the little lines and nuances of the figure moving and everything. They had to do 18 to 24 for every second you saw on the screen, multiplied by 90 minutes. That's why hundreds of people worked on that. So, it's pretty incredible. And even with modern technology, digital technology, it's still a time-consuming process. But the tools are amazing now. Questions, anyone, about anything that we've talked about? 2D media. Okay. You ready, right? Give you a moment to look over your notes, and then we will give you the test. When you're through with the test, hang around, because we're going to do something else afterwards. Now, when you get this, please put your first and last name. If you only put your first name, I'm sorry, but you're not that famous yet. I will take off 5 points. Actually. I am. Okay? If you want to give up 5 points, just put your one name on it. But I'm glad everyone has their 15 seconds, right? Okay. So we're going to hand out the test now. Put away your notes, please. Now, I want to say this to everyone. Please take your time. And I will tell you this. If you come across a term or a word on the multiple choice that you've never seen before, it's smart not to choose that as your answer, right? Okay, just a heads up on that. And I will put the bonus question up here in just a moment. You can just write your answer to the bonus question at the end of the exam. Take your time, look over everything carefully. When you're through, look it over and then turn it in and sit tight. So we'll keep going.
Mr. Hope, we're done in Plainview.
Thank you, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
No. Lubbock, have you all finished? You still working?
They're still working.
All right, I'm not trying to rush you. y'all?
Robert is
so-
finished.
You finished? Okay, excellent. Okay, let me switch cameras here. What I plan to do, see if I get back up here. There we go. What I planned to do was to talk about the mosaics. I will do that on Thursday. Y'all see I'm wearing my pink today. That's appropriate for this month, right? And ladies and gentlemen both, make sure that your loved ones and you yourself, ladies, check yourself. My niece is going through some serious radiation treatment that's specific to cancer that after having breast cancer and recovering from that, she had it show up nearly a year later in her brain. And so praying for her and thinking about her today. Later this afternoon, I'll be attending a graveside service for a sweet friend that worked here at SPC who survived breast cancer but then had other complications. And so thinking about those people and praying for them right now. But you all, please take care of yourselves. I will look forward to seeing you on Thursday. The grades should be in the grade center sometime later, so y'all bear with me. Take care. Blessings.